This message did not arrive by accident. It did not find you because of chance, timing, or curiosity. It found you because heaven interrupted your routine. Right now, as these words reach your ears, something far greater than an algorithm is at work. God is sounding an alarm, and the urgency is real. This is not meant to frighten you, but to waken you. There are moments when God whispers, and there are moments when He warns. This is a warning wrapped in mercy, a message sent not to condemn you, but to protect your future from years of unnecessary struggle. If your spirit feels unsettled as you listen, that is not fear, it is recognition. Something within you already knows this is serious. There are spiritual matters that do not announce themselves loudly. They do not come with visible signs or dramatic moments. Instead, they settle quietly into patterns, repeated delays, unexplained resistance, emotional heaviness that does not lift no matter how much you try to move forward. God is revealing that what you have been battling is not random. It is not simply bad luck or poor timing. There is a spiritual weight connected to words, emotions, or intentions released by someone close to you, someone you love, someone you trust. And that is why this is so dangerous. Because curses that come from familiar places hide behind affection and history. Understand this clearly. God is not accusing your family member to turn your heart bitter. He is exposing the source so you can be free. Many people live their entire lives under spiritual interference because they never realize where it entered. The most powerful traps are the ones we don't recognize as traps. This is why this message carries a time frame. You are not being rushed to panic. You are being invited into alignment. There is a window of grace open right now, and it will not remain open indefinitely. Heaven respects timing. Obedience delayed often becomes obedience denied. The reason this warning matters so deeply is because spiritual cycles, once established, do not break themselves. If left untouched, they repeat. They settle into years. What begins as a season becomes a pattern, and what becomes a pattern begins to feel normal, even when it is not what God intended for you. God is stepping in before the pattern hardens. He is giving you awareness before acceptance sets in. That alone is evidence of His protection over your life. You are not being punished. You are being preserved. You may be wondering why this would come through someone you love. Why God would allow a curse, spoken or unspoken, to come from such a close place. The answer is painful, but important. Emotional closeness creates spiritual excess. Words spoken in moments of jealousy, anger, control, or unresolved pain carry weight when they come from those connected to us by blood or deep bond. Many curses are not deliberate rituals. They are emotional releases that land spiritually because they were never healed. God sees the root, not just the result. And He is addressing it now because the fruit is starting to show. This message is urgent because awareness alone is not enough. Recognition must be followed by action. There are moments when God waits patiently, and there are moments when He calls for immediate response. This is one of those moments. The next 3 days are not random. They are a mercy window, a short span where obedience carries accelerated authority. If this window closes without action, the cycle does not disappear. It continues quietly, slowly shaping the years ahead. God is not threatening you with time. He is rescuing you from it. If you feel a tightening in your chest, a sudden seriousness, or a sense that this message is speaking directly to your situation, do not dismiss that. Conviction is not condemnation. It is clarity. God warns those He intends to protect. He exposes what He plans to heal. And He never sends a message without also preparing a way of escape. The fact that you are hearing this now means the curse does not have final authority. It means it can be broken. But timing matters. Attention matters. Obedience matters. This is not about blaming a family member or reopening old wounds. It is about understanding spiritual law. What enters through words must be addressed through truth. What binds through emotion must be released through forgiveness and authority. God is preparing you for that process, but first, He needed your attention. He needed you to stop scrolling, stop doubting, stop postponing, and listen. Because what you do next determines whether this remains a warning or becomes a turning point. Do not minimize this moment. God chose to warn you before the damage became permanent. Many never receive that grace. This is the opening of the message, not the end of it. What comes next will explain why this happened, how it hath been operating, and what God has already prepared to dismantle it completely. This is not about fear. This is about freedom standing at your door, knocking urgently, asking to be let in before time moves forward again. Throughout history, God has never been silent before prolonged suffering. He warns before seasons turn into strongholds. He alerts before temporary resistance hardens into generational delay. From the beginning, God has shown a pattern. Revelation always comes before rescue. He speaks before things spiral, not after they collapse completely. This is because God is not reactive. He is intentional. When He sends a warning, it is proof that intervention is possible. Silence would be far more dangerous than revelation. The fact that you are hearing this now means heaven has already decided that what has been operating against you does not have permission to continue unchecked. Many people misunderstand divine warnings. They assume a warning means judgment, but in truth, it means protection. God does not warn to scare His children. He warns to shield them. A warning is an act of love. It is God stepping into your path before something unseen causes long-term damage. The most devastating seasons in people's lives often begin with ignored warnings, small nudges, quiet discomfort, repeated signs that something is wrong beneath the surface. God is making sure you do not miss this one. He is making it clear because clarity is mercy. Scripture showed this pattern again and again. God warned before the flood. He warned Pharaoh before prolonged plagues. He warned Israel before captivity. He warned individuals before personal loss. Not because He desired destruction, but because He desired repentance, correction, and alignment. When warnings were heeded, outcomes changed. When they were ignored, cycles continued for years. This is why this message carries weight. You are not late. You are not behind. You are early enough to change what would have stretched into a long season of unnecessary struggle. One of the reasons divine warnings are often dismissed is because they don't always come with visible evidence. Spiritual issues rarely announce themselves in obvious ways. Instead, they hide behind rational explanations. People say, that's just life, where everyone goes through this, where things will eventually improve. But God sees what humans normalize. He sees patterns forming while people hope circumstances will fix themselves. Hope without alignment delays deliverance. That is why God interrupts with messages like this, to break denial before it becomes destiny. Another reason warnings are ignored is familiarity. When the source of spiritual interference is close family, loved ones, trusted voices, it becomes uncomfortable to confront. The mind resists the idea because the heart wants peace. But God prioritizes freedom over comfort. He does not expose the source to create division. He exposes it to stop damage. Ignoring truth to preserve surface peace often results in deeper loss later. God is saving you from that trade-off. He is asking you to value spiritual clarity over emotional avoidance. This message is also arriving now because timing matters in the spiritual realm. There are moments when resistance is light, and moments when it strengthens through repetition. The earlier something is confronted, the easier it is to dismantle. When left alone, spiritual interference compounds. What begins as mild delay turns into consistent obstruction. What begins as emotional heaviness turns into chronic discouragement. God is stepping in before the accumulation becomes overwhelming. This is not random timing. It is strategic mercy. You may be thinking, why didn't I realize this sooner? That question itself reveals God's grace. He reveals things when you are spiritually ready to handle them. Awareness without readiness can harm more than help. God waited until you had the maturity, the sensitivity, and the authority to respond correctly. That means you are not weak, you are prepared. And this message is not exposing your vulnerability, it is activating your responsibility. You are being trusted with truth because you are capable of responding to it. As you listen, it is important that you do not treat this like background noise. Divine warnings require attention. They ask for stillness, reflection, and willingness to act. This is not content to be consumed casually. This is instruction meant to be received intentionally. If you sense that this message resonates deeply, that is a sign your spirit is already engaging with what God is revealing. Lean into that. Do not rush past it. And if this message is helping you see clearly, take a moment right now to acknowledge that. Engage with it. Support what is reaching you. When you like this message, when you share it, when you subscribe to stay connected, you are not just interacting with a channel. You are aligning yourself with ongoing spiritual insight. You are choosing to remain alert rather than unaware. You are telling your spirit that warnings from God matter to you. And when you comment, you are not speaking into emptiness. You are affirming that this message found its assignment in you. God often confirms His warnings through repetition. He speaks once, then again, until clarity settles. If this is the second or third time something like this has crossed your path, that is not coincidence. That is confirmation. God is patient, but He is also precise. He will keep knocking until you answer, or until the moment passes. This is why attention now is so critical. What comes next will go deeper. God will begin to uncover how this interference entered, why it stayed hidden, and what authority you carry to remove it. This part was about awakening you to the seriousness of the warning, not to create fear, but to establish focus. You are not helpless. You are not trapped. But you are at a crossroads. And awareness is the first step toward freedom. The warning has been delivered. The door is open. What you do with this awareness will determine whether this becomes the moment everything began to change, or just another message you heard and moved past. The next part will reveal what many never see, and why understanding it changes everything. There is a truth many people struggle to accept, and yet it explains so much of what they have endured. Not every spiritual attack comes from strangers or enemies. Some of the deepest interference enters through familiar doors, through voices you trust, through people whose love for you is real but whose unresolved pain is also real. This is difficult to hear, but it is necessary to understand. God is revealing that the source of what has been affecting you is not distant. It is close, and that closeness is exactly why it has had power. When harm comes from outside, we guard ourselves instinctively. We pray harder. We become alert. But when it comes from family, from someone you love, the heart lowers its defenses. Words spoken in emotional moments are not filtered. Reactions are not guarded. And in those moments, statements born from jealousy, disappointment, fear, or control can carry spiritual weight. Not because the person intended evil, but because pain was speaking instead of healing. God is not labeling your loved one as malicious. He is exposing an unhealed wound that produced consequences far beyond the moment it was spoken. Many curses do not sound like curses. They sound like comments. You'll never change. Nothing ever works out for you. You always ruin things. I don't see you going far. When spoken repeatedly, especially by someone emotionally connected to you, these words sink deeper than you realize. They attach themselves to identity, not just circumstance. Over time, they shape expectations, decisions, and confidence. What was spoken casually begins to operate spiritually. God is revealing that this is not about blame. It is about awareness. The reason this truth is so painful is because love and harm feel incompatible. The mind resists it. The heart argues against it. But spiritual law does not cancel emotional truth. A person can love you deeply and still release words that bind. They can care for you and still project their fears onto your future. God sees both realities at once. That is why He is intervening. He is not tearing families apart. He is preventing long-term damage by addressing the root instead of the surface. You may have noticed patterns that never fully made sense. Opportunities that came close but never settled. Progress that started strong and then stalled. Emotional heaviness that lingered even when things seemed fine on the outside. These are not random experiences. They are symptoms. And symptoms point to sources. God is not asking you to relive old conversations or confront people in anger. He is asking you to recognize where spiritual permission was unknowingly granted so it can now be revoked. This is also why the curse remained hidden for so long. Familiar voices are normalized. You grow up hearing them. You learn to accept them. Over time, they feel like truth instead of influence. God waited until now because now you can see without collapsing emotionally. Earlier awareness might have produced resentment. Now, it can produce freedom. Timing matters. God reveals truth when it can heal rather than wound. There is another reason this kind of curse is dangerous. It often comes wrapped in authority. Parents, elders, siblings, or close family members carry influence simply because of their role. Their words land differently. The spiritual realm recognizes authority structures even when humans overlook them. God is not afraid of that authority. He outranks it. But He will not override what you do not confront. Heaven responds to acknowledgement. Once you see it, heaven gives you power to address it. If you are feeling emotional resistance right now, that is natural. This message touches places you may have avoided for years. But avoidance does not neutralize influence. Only truth does. And truth does not accuse, it liberates. God is not asking you to break relationships. He is asking you to break spiritual agreements formed through pain. Forgiveness is not weakness here. It is strategy. Authority flows through humility, not hostility. This is the moment where many people turn away because it feels uncomfortable. But if you stay, something shifts. Awareness breaks denial. And denial is what allows cycles to continue. You are closer to freedom than you realize, but it requires courage to see clearly. Hold on. What comes next changes everything, because God is about to show you why this curse did not destroy you and why it does not have the authority to remain. Before moving forward, this moment needs to be sealed. Not with fear, but with intention. Recognition has occurred. Awareness hath been activated. Now heaven responds. Type "I am released" in the comments if this truth is reaching you. Blessing code 614 is now activated. As this truth settles into your spirit, understand that messages like this do not travel without obedience and sacrifice. I speak to you now because I was sent to speak, and your response matters. When you give through super thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are sowing into a river that carries light to souls still trapped in silence. The Lord says He gives seed to the sower and bread to the eater, and right now, you are standing in that moment of choice. Your obedience becomes oil that keeps this fire burning across the world. Do not delay what heaven is prompting. Release your seed now through the PayPal link in the description or the QR code on the screen, and I declare that what you give will return as freedom, clarity, and multiplied blessing in your life. One of the most difficult questions people ask when truth finally surfaces is this: why did God allow it to remain hidden for so long? If this spiritual interference hath been operating quietly, shaping patterns and influencing outcomes, why was it not revealed earlier? The answer is not neglect. It is mercy. God does not reveal everything at once because revelation without readiness can wound instead of heal. What He exposes must be met with the capacity to respond correctly. Timing is protection. There are truths that, if revealed too early, would have broken you emotionally. You might have reacted in anger, confusion, or self-blame. You might have confronted the wrong person in the wrong spirit. God shields His children from premature exposure. He waits until your discernment is mature enough to separate the issue from the individual, the influence from the intention. Only then does revelation become liberating instead of destructive. This delay was not abandonment. It was careful preparation. Another reason this remained hidden is because familiarity dulls discernment. When something operates close to us, it blends into our normal experience. You don't question what you've always known. Patterns feel like personality. Repetition feels like fate. God allows time to pass so that patterns can fully reveal themselves. When something repeats often enough, it exposes itself as more than coincidence. Only then does awareness become undeniable. God is not late. He is precise. The enemy thrives in silence and confusion. It prefers subtlety over chaos. Loud attacks are easier to identify and resist. Quiet interference slips through unnoticed. That is why this was not dramatic. It was gradual. It wove itself into everyday life. Delays felt normal. Resistance felt explainable. Emotional heaviness felt personal. But God has now pulled back the veil. Silence no longer serves the purpose it once did. Exposure has begun, and exposure weakens influence. You must also understand that God does not violate free will. If He were to expose everything the moment it entered, many would resist the truth or deny it. Instead, He allows life to teach what words cannot. Experience creates readiness. When frustration reaches a certain point, when cycles become exhausting, the heart becomes willing to listen. That willingness is sacred. God waits for it. Now, you are listening not out of curiosity but out of necessity. That is the difference. There is also a spiritual reason for the timing. Certain authority only activates in certain stages of growth. You carry more spiritual weight now than you did before. You have survived things that strengthen your discernment. You have developed resilience. You have learned restraint. These qualities matter. When God reveals a source, He also releases authority to confront it. Revelation without authority would leave you vulnerable. Authority without revelation would be misdirected. God releases them together. This moment is not just about exposure. It is about transition. You are standing at the edge of a shift. Hidden things surface right before they lose their grip. This is a pattern in the spiritual realm. Darkness resists exposure because light dissolves it. The fact that this is coming to light now means its season of influence is ending. But endings require participation. God reveals, you respond. That partnership is essential. You may feel conflicted because part of you wants to go back to ignorance. Awareness brings responsibility. But ignorance never brought peace. It only delayed resolution. God is not burdening you with knowledge. He is equipping you with clarity. Clarity removes confusion, and confusion is where interference thrives. What you see now cannot operate the same way it did before. Even awareness alone weakens it. This is also why God is guiding you gently through this process. He is not overwhelming you with everything at once. Each part builds on the last. He is reframing your past so you can reclaim your future. What once felt personal now feels spiritual. What once felt random now feels explainable. This understanding is not meant to trap you in the past, but to free you from repeating it. Pay attention to what is shifting inside you as you listen. You may notice a sense of clarity replacing confusion. You may feel emotions rising that you didn't expect. That is not regression. That is release beginning. Truth stirs what had been buried so it can be healed properly. God is not reopening wounds to hurt you. He is cleaning them so they can finally close. This hiddenness was temporary by design. Every concealed thing has an appointed time to be revealed. You have reached that time. Not because circumstances forced it, but because God decided it. He does not reveal to expose you. He reveals to protect you from carrying what was never meant to stay. This is not the end of the message. It is the deepening of it. What comes next will explain how this influence was allowed to remain without your consent and why that does not mean you are powerless. God is about to show you the mechanics behind what happened so you can dismantle it with understanding, not emotion. This is where confusion gives way to authority and where awareness becomes action. Words are not empty. They are not harmless sounds that disappear once spoken. In the spiritual realm, words are seeds. They carry intention, emotion, and authority, and once released, they begin to move. This is a truth many underestimate, and it is why spoken words are one of the most powerful tools in both creation and destruction. God himself created the world with words, and in the same way, words spoken over a life can either align with his design or work against it. This is why God is now drawing your attention to the power of what was said, not just what was done. Most people assume curses must look dramatic or ritualistic to be real. They imagine dark ceremonies or deliberate malice. But the most dangerous words are often spoken casually, in moments of heightened emotion. Words released in anger, frustration, disappointment, or jealousy do not return empty. They carry spiritual substance. When spoken by someone close to you, those words find a place to land. They attach themselves to identity, to expectation, to future outcomes. And once planted, they begin to grow unless uprooted. This is why certain phrases echo in your mind long after they were spoken. You may not consciously remember when they were first said, but their impact lingers. They shape how you see yourself. They influence what you believe is possible. Over time, they become internal dialogue, repeating quietly whenever you attempt something new or step forward. God is revealing that these thoughts did not originate in you. They were planted, and what was planted through words must be confronted through truth. There is a spiritual principle at work here. Words spoken with emotional force carry spiritual permission. When pain speaks, it releases more than sound. It releases agreement, and agreement is powerful. The spiritual realm responds to agreement. If words spoken over you were never challenged, never corrected, never broken, they continued operating by default. Not because you deserved it, but because spiritual systems respond to what is left unaddressed. God is now giving you the understanding needed to interrupt that system. This is also why effort alone has not been enough. You may have tried to push through, stay positive, work harder, or ignore the heaviness. But effort does not cancel spiritual agreements. Ignoring them does not dissolve them. God is not dismissing your strength. He is explaining why strength alone could not fix this. The issue was not your ability. It was the invisible resistance created by words that were never revoked. Now that you see this, the approach changes. Another reason words are so powerful is because they shape atmosphere. When certain statements are spoken repeatedly, they create an environment where limitation feels normal. In that environment, fear grows easily, confidence weakens, and hope feels fragile. God never intended you to live in an atmosphere shaped by someone else's pain. He intended your life to be shaped by His promises. But atmospheres must be confronted intentionally. They do not shift on their own. You may now realize why certain opportunities felt heavy even when they looked good. Why stepping forward triggered anxiety instead of excitement. Why you doubted yourself even when evidence supported you. These reactions were not personality flaws. They were responses to words that had been operating beneath the surface. God is not exposing this to make you relive it, but to remove it. Awareness is the beginning of authority. It is important to understand that not every word spoken over you still has power. Only the ones that were never broken, never replaced, never confronted. Silence does not neutralize words. Only truth does. And truth must be spoken intentionally. God will soon guide you into that process. But first, He needed you to understand the mechanism. You cannot dismantle what you do not understand. Now you are beginning to see clearly. This also explains why forgiveness is central to freedom. And forgiveness keeps agreements alive. It ties you emotionally to the words spoken and gives them ongoing access. Forgiveness does not excuse what was said. It removes its legal right to operate. God is not asking you to forget or minimize the pain. He is asking you to release it so it no longer governs your future. Forgiveness is not weakness here. It is strategy. Words can bind, but words can also break. The same principle that allowed interference is the principle God will use to restore you. He will replace what was spoken in pain with what He has spoken in purpose. But replacement must be intentional. Silence creates a vacuum. Truth fills it. God is preparing you to speak differently, to agree with Him instead of with past wounds. As this understanding settles, you may feel both clarity and urgency. That is because knowledge brings responsibility. You now know that words mattered more than you realized. And that means what comes next will matter deeply. God is not leaving you here. He is moving you toward action. What He revealed, He intends to heal completely. In the next part, God will show you how these words were allowed to remain without your conscious consent, and why that does not mean you are powerless. This understanding will shift you from reflection into readiness. You are not just learning what happened. You are being prepared to end it. The mention of a 3-day window is not symbolic language meant to create urgency without meaning. It is rooted in a spiritual principle that appears repeatedly throughout Scripture and spiritual law. 3 days represent transition, intervention, and reversal. It is the space between what was and what will be. God often works within defined windows because timing governs authority. When heaven sets a window, it is because conditions are aligned for change that will not always remain available in the same way. In the Bible, 3 days often marked moments where something appeared finished, sealed, or irreversible, only for God to step in and alter the outcome. It was after 3 days that revelation came, direction shifted, and power was released. This pattern matters because spiritual resistance recognizes timing. There are moments when interference is weaker, when authority is heightened, and when obedience carries multiplied effect. This is one of those moments for you. The reason this window is short is not because God is impatient, but because delay strengthens what should be dismantled. Spiritual interference feeds on postponement. Each day something remains unchallenged. It becomes more familiar, more entrenched, more normalized. God is interrupting before normalization becomes permanence. He is asking for attention now because now carries leverage. Later carries consequences. You may feel pressure when you hear 3 days, but understand this clearly. Pressure does not come from God. Clarity does. God is not rushing you into panic. He is calling you into alignment. Alignment requires decisiveness. When heaven opens a window, it expects response, not hesitation. This is not about perfection. It is about willingness. God is not measuring your performance. He is looking for your participation. Another reason this window exists is because awareness has already been activated. Once truth is revealed, responsibility follows. Before, you could not act because you did not know. Now, you know. And knowing changes your position. The spiritual realm recognizes awareness as consent or refusal. What you allow knowingly has different weight than what happened unknowingly. God has moved you from unconscious exposure into conscious authority. That shift triggers timing. There is also a protective element in this window. God does not want you to sit with this knowledge for too long without action, because unresolved awareness can turn into anxiety. He does not want you overthinking, replaying memories, or internalizing blame. Action breaks rumination. Obedience stabilizes the heart. This 3-day period is not meant for fear or self-examination alone. It is meant for intentional alignment with God's instruction. You might wonder what happens if this window is ignored. The truth is not that God abandons you, but that cycles continue until they are confronted. Grace remains, but momentum shifts. What could have been broken cleanly may require more effort later. What could have ended quietly may stretch into a longer process. God is offering you the most efficient path, not the only one. Efficiency is mercy. This window also tests trust. It asks whether you will move based on revelation or wait for further confirmation. Faith responds to clarity, not comfort. God rarely explains everything before asking for obedience. He reveals enough to act, not enough to control the outcome. This is how trust is built. You are being invited to trust that what God revealed is sufficient for the step He is asking you to take. There is something else important about 3-day windows. They separate intention from decision. Many people intend to act but never decide to act. Intention fades. Decision moves. God is drawing a line between the two. He is saying, this matters enough to decide. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Now. Decision creates movement in the spiritual realm. It signals seriousness. It closes doors that hesitation keeps open. You may feel resistance rising as this becomes clearer. That resistance is not proof you are doing something wrong. It is proof you are approaching something that does not want to be confronted. Interference resists exposure. It thrives in delay. Do not interpret resistance as a sign to stop. Interpret it as confirmation that action matters. This window is not about completing a complicated process. It is about positioning your heart, your words, and your attention correctly. God will guide you step by step. He does not overwhelm. He instructs. What he asks will be clear, simple, and aligned with peace, not fear. Peace does not mean absence of seriousness. It means presence of direction. You are not alone in this window. God is not watching from a distance, waiting to see if you fail. He is actively involved. You opened the window. You revealed the truth. And he is ready to respond to your obedience. This is not a test designed to trip you. It is an opportunity designed to free you. What comes next will focus on what happens if this window is ignored and how cycles quietly extend over years without dramatic signs. Understanding this will strengthen your resolve. God is not just asking you to act. He is helping you understand why acting now protects your future. When a spiritual issue is not confronted, it does not disappear, it settles. It embeds itself quietly into daily life, shaping years without ever announcing its presence. This is how cycles are formed. Not through sudden collapse, but through slow repetition. What could have been a brief obstacle becomes a long-term pattern. What could have been corrected early becomes familiar, and familiarity is dangerous because it dulls urgency. God is revealing this now so you can see what was happening beneath the surface all along. Cycles rarely feel dramatic. They feel frustrating, tiring, and confusing. You may have noticed that certain struggles repeat themselves with different faces but the same outcome. Relationships that follow a similar pattern. Opportunities that begin with promise but end in delay. Seasons where progress feels just out of reach no matter how much effort you apply. These repetitions are not coincidences. They are indicators. Patterns are the language cycles use to reveal themselves. One of the most deceptive things about long-term spiritual interference is that it solely reshapes expectations. Over time, you stop hoping for full breakthrough and start settling for partial relief. You learn to manage instead of resolve. You adjust your dreams to match your experience instead of your calling. God never intended you to live in adjustment mode. But cycles convince people that endurance is the same as victory. It is not. Endurance without resolution eventually leads to exhaustion. Another way cycles manifest is through emotional heaviness that never fully lifts. You may experience moments of joy, but they feel fragile, temporary, easily disrupted. Peace comes and goes. Confidence rises briefly, then collapses without clear reason. This emotional instability is not weakness. It is the result of an unresolved spiritual root pulling on your inner world. God is not disappointed in you for feeling tired. He is exposing why rest has been elusive. Cycles also distort identity over time. When delays repeat, you may begin to internalize them as personal failure. You ask yourself what you are doing wrong, while others seem to move forward more easily, while your efforts do not produce lasting results. The self-questioning becomes self-doubt. Self-doubt becomes self-limitation. The cycle tightens its grip not by force, but by suggestion. God is interrupting that process now before it shapes how you see yourself permanently. One of the most painful effects of long-term cycles is that they steal years quietly. Nothing dramatic happens, yet time passes. You look back and realize how much energy you spent trying to fix, explain, or endure things that were never meant to stay. God values time deeply. He does not want you to lose more of it to something that can be addressed. This is not about regret, it is about preservation. He is stepping in before more years slip by under unnecessary weight. It is also important to understand that cycles do not always remain constant. They often intensify. What starts as mild resistance can become stronger opposition. What starts as occasional discouragement can deepen into chronic weariness. The longer a cycle runs, the more normalized it becomes, and the harder it is to imagine life without it. God is intervening now because imagination is returning. You are beginning to believe again that change is possible, that belief matters. Cycles are especially dangerous because they create false explanations. You may attribute them to personality, environment, or circumstances. While those factors can influence experience, they do not explain consistency across different seasons. God is showing you that when outcomes repeat despite changing conditions, the root is not circumstantial. It is spiritual. And spiritual words require spiritual solutions. This is why effort alone has not broken the pattern. You may have worked harder, prayed more, tried new approaches, or changed environments. Yet the underlying resistance remained. That does not mean your efforts were wasted. They sustained you. But they were not designed to uproot something that required authority. God is now shifting you from survival mode into resolution mode. Survival keeps you going. Resolution sets you free. Another sign of a cycle is delayed fulfillment. Promises feel close but never complete. You catch glimpses of what could be, but something always interferes before it settles. This creates emotional tension, hope mixed with disappointment. Over time, people stop expecting fulfillment to avoid pain. God does not want you living guarded against hope. He wants hope restored, stable, and confident. That requires removing what keeps interrupting fulfillment. You may now see that what you thought was patience was actually endurance under interference. Patience is peaceful. Endurance under cycles is exhausting. God is distinguishing between the two. He is not asking you to endure longer. He is inviting you to confront what endurance was covering. That invitation is an act of love. Understanding how cycles operate is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to motivate you. Once you see the pattern, you can no longer treat it as normal. Normalization is what allowed it to persist. Awareness disrupts that, and disruption is the beginning of freedom. What comes next will focus on God's strategy to break what has been operating against you. This is not something you have to figure out on your own. God has already prepared the way. He reveals the problem because He has already designed the solution. The cycle ends not through effort, but through alignment. And that alignment is closer than you think. God never reveals a problem without already preparing the solution. What hath been operating against you is not stronger than the authority God has placed within you, but authority must be activated intentionally. This is where many people stop short. They recognize the issue, understand the pattern, and even feel urgency, but they never step into alignment with God's strategy. Strategy matters. Emotional reactions do not break spiritual agreements. Alignment does. God's strategy always begins with restoring order. Interference thrives where order hath been disrupted. In your case, order was disrupted through words, emotions, and unhealed wounds that created spiritual access. God does not fight chaos with more chaos. He restores alignment with truth. This is why He is guiding you step by step instead of overwhelming you. Each step reclaims territory that was quietly occupied. The first part of God's strategy is acknowledgement without accusation. You are not required to confront the family member, relive the conversation, or demand explanations. That is not where authority flows. Authority flows when you acknowledge before God what happened, without hatred or denial. God already knows the details. What He is waiting for is agreement with truth. Agreement with truth breaks agreement with interference. The second part of the strategy is forgiveness, not as an emotional feeling, but as a spiritual decision. Forgiveness is not saying what happened was acceptable. It is saying it no longer has authority. And forgiveness keeps spiritual doors open. Forgiveness closes them. This is why God emphasizes it so strongly. Forgiveness removes the legal ground that allowed the words to operate. Without legal ground, interference loses its hold. The third part of God's strategy is verbal realignment. Just as words were used to bind, words must be used to release. Silence does not undo spoken influence. Truth spoken aloud replaces it. This is not about repeating phrases mechanically. It is about agreeing out loud with what God says instead of what was said in pain. Your voice matters in this process. God honors spoken alignment. Another critical element in God's strategy is replacing identity. Words spoken over you did not just affect circumstances. They tried to redefine who you are. God now reasserts his definition. You are not what was said about you. You are who he called you to be. Identity restoration weakens every lie that fed the cycle. When identity shifts, behavior, expectation, and opportunity follow. God's strategy also involves separation without division. This means separating spiritually from the influence without breaking relational bonds unnecessarily. You can love someone and still remove their words from your spiritual space. God does not require isolation. He requires discernment. Discernment allows you to honor relationships without allowing them to shape your destiny incorrectly. It is important to understand that breaking a curse does not always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels like clarity. Sometimes it feels like peace where tension used to be. Sometimes it feels like emotional lightness. Do not dismiss subtle shifts. Subtle shifts indicate deeper change. Loud moments fade quickly. Quiet alignment lasts. As this strategy unfolds, resistance may try to rise one last time. This is common. When influence realizes its access is being revoked, it resists. Do not interpret resistance as failure. Interpret it as confirmation. You are not going backward. You are crossing a threshold. And thresholds are always contested briefly before they are secured. God's strategy is not complicated, but it is intentional. It requires attention, humility, and obedience. Not perfection, not emotional intensity. Obedience. Heaven responds to obedience faster than it responds to emotion. You do not need to feel powerful to act in authority. Authority comes from alignment, not feelings. As you listen to this, something is already shifting. Awareness plus obedience creates movement. You are not preparing for freedom. You are stepping into it. But do not rush past this moment. There is more God wants to show you that will protect what he is restoring. You'll be glad you stayed for what's about to be revealed, because the next part will explain how to maintain this freedom so it does not quietly erode again. Before moving forward, this moment must be sealed spiritually. Type "I walk in authority" in the comments if you receive this. Lesson code 842 is now activated. As God reveals strategy, he also releases responsibility. I speak to you now as someone sent to sound this alarm. When you give through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are not supporting a channel. You are fueling a message that breaks chains in lives you may never meet. The Lord says that those who sow into truth will reap freedom, and this is your moment of obedience. Do not hesitate when heaven is prompting you. Use the PayPal link in the description or the QR code on the screen and release your seed now. I declare that as you give, what God is breaking in your life will not return, and what he is restoring will multiply. Now that God has revealed the strategy, the most important question becomes this: what must you do immediately? Revelation without response changes nothing. Understanding without action leaves cycles intact. God has already done the exposing. He has already outlined the authority. Now He calls for obedience. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now. What you do in this moment determines whether the door that has been opened leads to freedom or quietly closes again. The first thing you must do is adjust your posture. This is not about fear, panic, or desperation. God does not operate through chaos. Your posture must be calm, intentional, and surrendered. Anxiety weakens focus. Stillness sharpens it. When God gives instruction, He expects attention, not emotional overwhelm. Take this seriously, but do not carry it heavily. Authority flows best through peace. Next, you must be careful with your words. During this window, avoid repeating negative narratives about yourself or your life. Do not rehearse past disappointments. Do not speak frustration out loud. This is not suppression. It is discipline. You are closing old agreements and opening new ones. Words spoken now matter more than usual because alignment is active. Speak less if needed, but speak intentionally when you do. Another critical action is forgiveness in practice, not theory. This means choosing not to replay the offense, not to justify resentment, not to mentally argue with the past. Forgiveness during this time is an act of authority. Each time you resist the urge to revisit the wound, you weaken its influence. This is not denial. It is dominion. God honors this restraint because it reflects trust in His justice rather than your own. You must also guard your attention. Distraction is one of the enemy's favorite tools during moments of breakthrough. Suddenly, everything demands your focus. Noise increases. Fatigue sets in. This is not accidental. Protect your attention. Even a few intentional moments of reflection and prayer during these days create spiritual reinforcement. You do not need long rituals. You need consistency and sincerity. There are also things you must not do. Do not confront the family member emotionally unless God clearly instructs you to do so. Emotional confrontation often reopens doors rather than closing them. Do not seek validation from others who do not understand the spiritual nature of what is happening. Not everyone is equipped to carry this revelation with you. God is working with you directly in this moment. Another action God is asking for is acknowledgement. Do not dismiss what you are sensing. If this message resonates, honor that resonance. Engage with it. When you engage, you signal readiness. If this message is helping you gain clarity, take a moment to like it, to share it, to subscribe so you stay connected to messages that sharpen discernment. These are not happy actions. They are markers of attention and alignment. And when you comment, you are not speaking into space. You are affirming that you are present, aware, and responsive. Sharing this message is also part of obedience. Not because everyone will understand it, but because someone else is in the same window and does not yet know it. God often uses one person's obedience to alert another. You do not need to explain it perfectly. You just need to pass it along. Light multiplies when it is shared. Another important step is expectancy without obsession. Expect change, but do not strain to measure it. Expectancy. God does not always move in visible ways first. Sometimes the first shift is internal, peace where there was tension, clarity where there was confusion. Trust those shifts. They are evidence of alignment, not imagination. You may feel tempted to rush ahead, to ask what comes next, to want everything resolved immediately. Resist that urge. Obedience unfolds step by step. God rarely reveals the entire path at once. He reveals enough for the next step. Today's step is alignment. Tomorrow's step will come when needed. Trust the process. If you feel resistance rising internally, do not be alarmed. Resistance often surfaces right before resolution. It is the last attempt of interference to maintain relevance. Do not argue with it. Do not analyze it. Simply continue in obedience. Authority is quiet. It does not need to prove itself. This is also the moment to release self-blame. You did not cause this. You did not invite it intentionally. You responded with the awareness you had at the time. God is not correcting you. He is covering you. Shame has no place here. Shame weakens authority. Grace strengthens it. As you move through this part, remember this. You are not fighting something. You are finishing something. God has already declared the end. Your role is to walk it out. Stay present. Stay intentional. Stay aligned. Do not drift into distraction now. What you do in this window matters more than you realize. Hold on, because what comes next will show you the signs that confirm the shift has begun and how to recognize that the cycle is truly broken. This understanding will protect what God is restoring and help you walk forward with confidence instead of fear. When a curse breaks, the shift is often quieter than people expect, but deeper than they realize. God does not always announce freedom with noise. Many times He introduces it with peace, a calm that arrives without explanation, a heaviness that lifts even though circumstances have not yet changed. This is important to understand, because if you are looking only for dramatic external signs, you may overlook the internal confirmation that the cycle has already been disrupted. One of the first signs of a true shift is relief in your inner world. Thoughts that once looped endlessly lose their grip. The urgency to overthink begins to soften. You may notice that situations which once triggered anxiety now feel manageable. This is not emotional numbness. It is emotional stability returning. When spiritual interference is removed, the nervous system often follows. God restores order from the inside out. Another sign is clarity. Decisions that once felt confusing become simpler. You begin to sense direction instead of resistance. You may not have every answer, but you no longer feel stuck between options. Confusion is often a byproduct of spiritual interference. When that interference lifts, clarity becomes natural. God is not forcing direction. He is restoring discernment. You may also notice changes in how you speak to yourself. Internal dialogue shifts. Words of limitation lose volume. Self-doubt feels less convincing. This is not self-help or positive thinking. This is identity realignment. When the source of negative agreement is removed, the mind begins to align with truth more easily. God's voice becomes clearer when other voices are silenced. Externally, doors may begin to open gradually, not all at once but steadily. Opportunities that once stalled may move forward without the same resistance. Conversations may flow more smoothly. Timing may feel less strained. These are subtle but significant indicators. God often restores momentum before visible results fully manifest. Momentum is the sign that resistance has been removed. Another confirmation is emotional neutrality toward the past. Memories may still exist, but they no longer carry the same charge. You can think about what happened without feeling pulled back into it. This emotional distance is not detachment. It is healing. When something no longer controls your emotional response, it no longer controls your future. God restores memory without pain as a sign of freedom. You may also experience renewed energy. Tasks that once felt draining feel lighter. Motivation returns without force. This is because energy was being siphoned by unresolved spiritual pressure. When that pressure lifts, strength returns naturally. God is not adding something new. He is restoring what was being drained. It is important to understand that freedom does not mean perfection. Challenges may still arise. Life continues. But the difference is resistance. What once blocked progress no longer has authority to stop it. Obstacles become navigable instead of paralyzing. This distinction matters. Freedom is not the absence of difficulty. It is the absence of invisible opposition shaping outcomes behind the scenes. Another sign of a broken cycle is consistency. Peace lasts longer. Progress holds. Setbacks do not derail you the way they used to. Emotional recovery becomes faster. You no longer spiral as deeply or for as long. This consistency is evidence that something foundational has changed. Temporary motivation fades. Structural change remains. You may also notice a shift in relationships. Not necessarily dramatic changes, but subtle rebalancing. Dynamics feel healthier. Boundaries feel easier to maintain. You are less reactive. This is because when spiritual agreements break, relational patterns adjust naturally. You no longer operate from the same emotional triggers. God restores relational parity when internal alignment is corrected. It is crucial not to rush this phase. Do not pressure yourself to prove that something has changed. Proof-seeking often pulls attention back to the past. Instead, remain observant and grateful. Gratitude anchors new ground. It reinforces alignment. Thankfulness is not denial of struggle. It is recognition of shift. You may feel tempted to test the freedom by revisiting old patterns mentally. Resist that urge. Freedom does not need testing. It needs maintenance. Maintenance comes through awareness, not fear. Simply notice what is different. Honor it. Protect it by continuing to align your words, attention, and expectations with what God has restored. Another important aspect of this stage is patience with manifestation. Internal shifts often precede external outcomes. Do not misinterpret delayed results as failure. God often stabilizes the foundation before accelerating the structure. Stability matters. You are not behind. You are being established. As you walk forward, remain attentive but not anxious. Awareness keeps doors closed. Anxiety reopens them. Trust that what God has broken does not need constant monitoring. He is not fragile. His work does not unravel easily. Your role now is to walk forward with confidence, not caution. What you are experiencing now is not temporary relief. It is the beginning of a new pattern. Patterns can work in your favor just as powerfully as they once worked against you. God is establishing a different rhythm in your life, one marked by peace, clarity, and forward movement. The next part will help you understand why the enemy attempted to delay you and how recognizing those tactics protects you from future interference. This awareness will ensure that what has been broken remains broken, and that what God has restored continues to grow. There is a reason delay was used against you, and understanding it will protect you moving forward. Delay is not always about stopping progress outright. Often, it is about wearing down expectation. If something can be postponed long enough, people stop believing it will ever change. Hope dulls. Urgency fades. Perseverance replaces resistance. This is how interference survives, not by overpowering you, but by convincing you to wait, to tolerate, to adjust. The enemy understands something many people overlook. Time changes perspective. What feels unacceptable today can feel normal after years of repetition. Delay stretches problems until they feel permanent. God is revealing this now because once you see the tactic, it loses its effectiveness. Awareness dismantles deception. You are no longer confused about why things lingered. You can now see that waiting was not patience. It was strategy used against you. One of the most common ways delay works is through distraction. Life becomes busy. Responsibilities pile up. Fatigue increases. Important issues get pushed to later. Later becomes months. Months become years. Nothing dramatic happens, so nothing urgent seems required. This is how cycles remain undisturbed. God interrupted that rhythm by sending this message. Interruption is mercy. It breaks momentum in the wrong direction. Another tactic of delay is discouragement disguised as realism. Thoughts like "this is just how life is" or "things don't really change" feel logical, but they are not neutral. They slowly erode faith. Faith does not always disappear loudly. Sometimes it just grows quiet. God is restoring your ability to expect change again, because expectation is dangerous to cycles. Cycles thrive where hope is low. Delay also works through self-doubt. You may have questioned whether you were capable of handling more, whether change would overwhelm you, whether freedom would require too much responsibility. These doubts feel personal, but they are strategic. They keep people from stepping into alignment. God is showing you that readiness was never the issue. Timing was being manipulated, and now timing has been reclaimed. Another layer of delay is emotional attachment to familiarity. Even unhealthy patterns can feel safer than the unknown. Freedom requires adjustment. It requires learning new rhythms, new expectations, new ways of responding. Delay keeps people anchored to what they know, even when it hurts. God is gently, but firmly pulling you out of that comfort, not to destabilize you, but to expand you. The enemy also uses delay by exaggerating complexity. It convinces people that change requires complicated steps, long processes, or perfect conditions. This creates paralysis. People wait until everything feels right. Everything never feels right. God's approach is different. He simplifies. He clarifies. He asked for obedience in manageable steps. Delay collapses when simplicity is restored. You may now recognize moments where you sensed something was off but postponed addressing it. That recognition is not meant to shame you. It is meant to sharpen you. You responded with the awareness you had then. Now you have more. And with more awareness comes more authority. You are not being judged for past delays. You are being equipped to avoid future ones. Understanding the tactic of delay also helps you maintain what has been restored. You now know that if resistance tries to return, it will likely do so quietly, not through crisis, but through gradual distraction. Protecting your freedom means staying attentive without becoming anxious. It means addressing small shifts before they grow. It means not dismissing inner nudges as inconvenience. God does not want you living on constant alert, scanning for threats. He wants you living with discernment. Discernment is calm. It notices without panicking. It responds without overreacting. Discernment grows through alignment, not fear. Now that you know delay was used, you can recognize its early signs and respond appropriately. Another important insight is this: delay loses power once you decide not to negotiate with it. Decision is a boundary. When you decide that alignment matters more than comfort, delay has nowhere to land. It feeds on indecision. God is strengthening your ability to decide, not impulsively but intentionally. You may also notice that now, when something feels off, you are quicker to address it. That is not hypervigilance. That is maturity. God is restoring your responsiveness. Responsiveness prevents accumulation. Accumulation creates cycles. This awareness alone protects you from repeating the past. The enemy attempted to delay you because delay was the only tool left. Awareness broke confusion. Alignment broke authority. All that remained was time, and time has now been reclaimed. You are no longer operating on borrowed explanations or inherited patterns. You are operating with clarity. This understanding seals what God has done. You are not just free, you are informed. Informed freedom lasts. It does not depend on emotion. It depends on truth. Truth does not shift with circumstances. It angers. The final part will bring everything together. It will seal this message with assurance, restoration, and divine covering. What God began with warning, you will end with peace. You are not walking away from this moment uncertain. You are stepping forward grounded, protected, and strengthened. This is not how the story ends, with fear, tension, or uncertainty. This is where it settles into peace. God does not reveal truth to leave his children exposed. He reveals it to cover them. What began as a warning now concludes as assurance. You are not standing at the edge of danger. You are standing in the place of protection. The very fact that God warned you before years were lost proves his intention toward you has always been good. What was sent against you did not outlast God's authority. What tried to linger quietly has now been brought into the light. And light does not negotiate with darkness. It replaces it. You are not leaving this moment weaker or shaken. You are leaving clearer, steadier, and more grounded than before. God does not restore partially. When he finishes a work, it is complete in its purpose, even if it unfolds gradually in manifestation. Take a moment to recognize what has already changed inside you. The fear that once clung to uncertainty has loosened. The confusion that followed repeated cycles has begun to dissolve. You are no longer guessing what went wrong or blaming yourself for patterns you could not explain. Understanding has replaced accusation. Peace has replaced heaviness. That is not imagination. That is alignment. God is sealing this moment with reassurance. He is reminding you that no word spoken in pain has more authority than his word spoken in purpose. No emotional release from another person outranks his intentional design for your life. What he blesses cannot be undone by what others speak in weakness. His covering is not fragile. His protection does not expire. You are not walking into the future exposed. You are walking into it guarded. From this point forward, your responsibility is not to relive what was revealed, but to live from what has been restored. Do not carry this message as a burden. Carry it as confirmation. Confirmation that God sees deeply. Confirmation that he intervenes precisely. Confirmation that your life is not drifting. It is being directed. There may still be moments when memories surface or old thoughts attempt to reappear. When they do, do not wrestle with them. Simply remember this. What was exposed has been aggressed. What was addressed no longer governs you. You do not need to revisit closed doors to make sure they are shut. Trust that God closed them properly. God is also reminding you that joy is permitted again. You do not need to brace yourself for loss or prepare for disappointment. Guarded living is not holy living. Confident trust is. He is restoring your ability to hope freely, to plan without anxiety, to move forward without constantly checking behind you. That freedom is intentional. Do not resist it. This message ends with peace because peace is the evidence of completion, not excitement, not intensity. Peace. peace that settles the heart, peace that steadies the mind, peace that confirms alignment. God's peace does not come from ignorance, it comes from authority. And that authority is now active in your life. As this closes, receive this final sealing. Type "I am covered" in the comments if you receive this word. Blessing code 931 is now activated. Let that be your declaration, not just here but moving forward. This message reached you because God intends it to reach many others who are still unaware of what's been operating against them. I speak to you now directly. Your obedience can become a lifeline for another soul. When you give through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are sowing light into places still trapped in silence. The Lord declares that those who release seed into truth will see harvest return in peace and restoration. Do not delay this prompting. Act now through the PayPal link in the description or the QR code on the screen. I bless every giver and declare that as you support this mission, God will protect, multiply, and establish you in ways you did not expect.